what does it actually mean to be poor in America today? You probably have a number in your head, right? Well, what if I told you that number isn't just a little off, it's completely, fundamentally wrong?
Okay, so right now, if you ask the US government, the official poverty line for a family of four is sitting at around $31,000. And look, this isn't just some random number, it's the number that shapes huge policies, everything from food stamps to school lunches.
But a recent analysis went totally viral and sparked this massive debate online. And why? Because it argues that this official number is basically a relic. It claims the real poverty line is nowhere close to what we're being told. So, the number he came up with, get ready for this, around $140,000. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. That sounds absolutely insane, right? But the logic behind it, that's what makes this whole conversation so fascinating. So how on earth do you get from 31,000 all the way up to 140,000? I mean, that's a $100,000 gap. Well, that's the mystery we're going to unpack right now. And it all starts by taking a little trip back in time. Right, to really get this new number, we first have to understand the old one. And for that, we have to go back to a very, very different America. Back in the 1960s. It's called the Orshansky method, named after an economist, Molly Orshansky. See, she was tasked with this huge job, define poverty. And she built her entire formula around one single thing that was super predictable back then, the cost of food. And the logic, honestly, it was brilliantly simple. It was a three-step process. First, you figure out the bare bones, absolute minimum cost to feed a family. Second, studies back then showed that food consistently made up about 1/3 of a family's entire budget. So for the third step, what do? You just multiply that food cost by 3. Boom, that's your poverty line. And look, for the time, this formula made perfect sense. It was built for a world where, one income could often support a whole family. That meant childcare wasn't this massive line item on the budget. Health insurance, usually covered by your job. And housing, well, it was a much, much smaller piece of the pie. But here's the absolute kicker. That formula, it was never really updated. It was never changed to reflect how our lives and our expenses have changed. It was basically frozen in time, only ever getting adjusted for inflation, not for, reality. Just take a look at this. In a typical 1960s budget, you can see food was the big anchor, right? 33%. Everything else was kind of calculated around that one big central expense. Okay, now fast forward to today, and whoa, the budget has completely flipped on its head. Food? It shrunk down to this tiny little slice. The new giants in the room are housing, childcare, and healthcare. Costs that haven't just grown, they've absolutely exploded. Yeah, this slide really lays out the disconnect perfectly. The one-income family? That's now a two-income necessity, which, guess what, creates massive childcare costs. And low housing costs? I mean, that's almost laughable today. Housing has become the single biggest financial burden for most families out there. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. If the economy evolves but the formula doesn't, then it doesn't make sense anymore. It's like we're trying to navigate today's world with a map from 1965. It just doesn't work. So what happens if we take that original logic from the 60s, but plug in today's numbers? Well, that's exactly what this viral analysis did, and it used 2 different methods to get there. The first method kind of updates that old 3-by multiplier we talked about. And the second method? It's way more direct. It just adds up all the non-negotiable, essential costs of modern life. Okay, now this first method, it seems a little counterintuitive at first, but stick with me, it makes sense. If food has shrunk from being 1/3 of your budget all the way down to just 7%, it doesn't mean you're rolling in extra cash. No way. It means everything else, housing, healthcare, childcare, has grown so enormously that food looks tiny by comparison. So to reflect that new reality, the multiplier has to jump from 3x all the way up to about 14x. All right, method 2 is even simpler to wrap your head around. You literally just add up the costs you can't avoid. So you take national averages for, say, modest housing, basic childcare for 2 working parents, healthcare, and food. You add it all up, and you need about $118,000 after taxes. Then you add in what you owe in federal, state, and FICA taxes, and you land right around that $136,000 figure. And let's be crystal clear about something. This is not a budget for a comfortable middle-class life. This is a survival budget. This is the bare minimum you need to just participate in the modern economy. It has zero luxuries. We're talking no vacations, no new phones, no eating out, and forget about savings or investments. Nothing extra. Okay, so why does this huge gap matter? Why should we care about the difference between 31,000 and 140,000? Well, because it explains this widespread feeling of economic anxiety that so many people have. This really explains that massive disconnect we all feel sometimes, right? We hear these positive headlines. Inflation is slowing down. Unemployment is low. The GDP is growing. But for so many of us, the reality on the ground feels completely different. Slowing inflation doesn't mean your rent actually went down. And having a job doesn't automatically mean you can cover all your bills. So if you've ever had that feeling like you're working super, super hard, but you're just not getting ahead, this data is basically telling you you're not crazy. You're not just imagining it. You're not doing something wrong. You're just running a race where the finish line keeps moving because the map we're all being told to use is 60 years out of date. Now, look, we can't individually control government formulas or housing prices or inflation, but the point of this isn't to feel helpless, not at all. It's to shift our focus to what we can control, things like your savings rate, your investing habits, and your own financial literacy. And that's really the crucial point here. The poverty line, whether it's the official one or this recalculated one, is just a metric for survival. It's about getting by. But building real financial security, that's not about just surviving. It's built on something else entirely: ownership and consistent investing. That is what creates possibility. And that really leaves us with one last question to think about for ourselves. When you look at your own financial plan, your own habits, are they just built for survival? Or are they actively built for possibility no matter what the official numbers say?